Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll start this meeting with announcements, and this evening I'm going to start way on my left with Councilman Quinn. Any announcements?
I get in the prime spot and I have no announcements.
All right, Ms. Butler?
We will come back to you. Yes, I do have a few announcements, and unfortunately, the first announcement is rather sad. Probably many of you know that Larry Ivan passed away, and he has been a real fixture and a friend in our community for many, many years. He was the pool manager, I think, for over 40 years. He also was the program director of our park system before we had a day camp system. And if anybody's participated in high school athletics or your children participated, you would have seen him as probably an official. And so that's very sad news. I feel pleased that the rec department had the foresight to honor him in the spring of 2016, and we have a lovely plaque of Larry, bus relief, anyway, out in the pool area. The services for Larry are going to be at 2 p.m. On Saturday the 18th no, that's not the 18th. What day is Saturday? The 16th. The 16th at Nassau Presbyterian Church, and I'm going to be in touch. I'm sure the town will be really busy that day. I'm going to talk with Kristen about some possible parking. So that's one thing. I have a couple of announcements from community partners of ours. We have the last holiday special needs dance this Friday night at John Witherspoon Middle School. And if you haven't done your good deed for the holidays, they are having a winter clothing drive for Homefront. So that's at John Witherspoon on Friday. As if those people aren't doing enough, they're also collecting clothes. And then on Saturday morning, December 16th, from 8:30 to 11:30, the Princeton High School Jazz Band is going to be holding a Jammin' with Santa. And I just made a few copies there at the back for children. This is to benefit a band from Puerto Rico that is going to be visiting. And so there's actually a list of supplies that they're looking for that they are going to kind of pack up and send home with these kids. But they're hoping to raise money. This is a really successful jazz band that participated in a competition last year in Boston and won, and now, of course, they've lost their instruments. They can't go to the concert and defend their title. So this is a fundraiser, and I'm just saying, I'm not going to spoil it, but you might recognize Santa and Mrs. Claus. I'm not saying who it is. And that's it for announcements.
Yeah, I have a way more mundane announcement that I want to start putting the word out for people to understand that we're likely going to be getting rid of the smart cards because we're getting new parking meters, and most likely they will just use credit cards, and so we're going to be phasing those out. So I'm just giving people a warning because we aren't going to be able to refund people. You have to just use up all the money that's on the card. But it's not going to be till a while. But I'm just putting that out, and we'll put make sure we have signs up on the machines too, that just get your short-term smart card, fill it up for the short term, but not the long term.
Mr. Miller, any announcements?
Yes, I do. I have a brief announcement concerning the work of the Shade Tree Commission. The Shade Tree Commission is working with a Princeton University graduate student who has been working with the hackathon, Princeton Hackathon. He's developing an app that will enable the identification of ash trees using a cell phone to take pictures of the leaf and the bark. If the identification is in doubt, then the picture would be forwarded to a member of the Shade Tree Commission or to our municipal arborist, who would then make the identification. The photo would also contain GIS data so that the location of the tree can be noted in the database for future follow-up. One possible use is by the Princeton High School environmental science class to identify ash trees on school property, and the Shade Tree Commission is investigating the possibility of entering into a working relationship with the app developer and the Princeton Public Schools on the use of the app to identify ash trees on the public school property. This project could be used by the Shade Tree Commission as an example of creating more public awareness of Princeton's urban forest under our community forestry management plan. And the community forestry management plan is the plan that enabled us to get a grant from the state to replant trees that we will lose because of the emerald ash borer.
Great. No, Mr. Milliman? Okay. I have a few announcements. The first is this Wednesday at 11:30 a.m., we're going to be having a special meeting here. And normally we honor our employees who are celebrating an anniversary with the municipality at one of our council meetings. But we're changing it up this year and doing it during the day to make it easier for our employees to actually be here to receive their awards and to be with their colleagues. So it's open to the public. Anybody who'd like to come is more than welcome. And again, that's Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Just also a reminder to my colleagues here to please come if you're able. And then on Wednesday evening, the 13th at 7 p.m. at the Princeton Public Library, Sustainable Princeton is going to be holding a session to do an update of where we are with the community sustainability plan from 2009. So we're approaching almost 10 years from when that plan was put together. And looking back over that plan will be one of the first steps before we move on with a new climate action plan. And then also I'm going to be holding my monthly Meet the Mayor this Friday, December 15th from 8:30 to 10 a.m. in the Princeton Public Library lobby. Normally I do it at the end of the month, but this month is a bad month to do it at the end of the month. So I'm going to be doing it this Friday. And then my next announcement is an announcement I wish I wouldn't have to make. And that is, we're probably aware that there's been a number of pretty ugly incidents with, there was a flyer found at the university. There have been some other things at our schools. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to reiterate on behalf of the council that hate has no home here in Princeton, and that I think it's incumbent upon all of us to speak up when it happens and to say that this is not who we want to be as a community. All right. Are there any staff announcements? Nope. Nope. Okay. All right. In that case, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. And we have several sets of minutes this evening. I think we'll go through here because I think there might be some abstentions because people are absent. So why don't we take them date by date? Yep.
I think the only one, Bernie, I think you were absent October 9th is the only one. Did I miss something? Otherwise, I'll move them in block.
Can we move them in
Why
block?
don't we start with the October 9th minutes and then we'll move the rest in block?
I think we can.
moved.
We can move them in block, assuming that people who weren't there are abstaining. That's what we just did at the planning board the other night, and it was makes it faster.
All right. Well, now we've discussed it more than
I know.
Okay. All right. Well, does somebody want to make a motion for? Did you just make a motion?
Yes.
Can you repeat it because I didn't hear it?
Well, I would move them in block with the exception of October 9th.
Second.
Okay. So it's been moved by Ms. Butler and seconded by Mr. Miller. All of the minutes except for the ones on October 9th. Any comments or corrections on those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now is there a motion to approve the 2 minutes from October 9th, the 2 sets?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Butler. Any comments or corrections on these minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I assume Mr. Miller's abstaining from those. All right, and now we'll move on to our award of recognition for this evening. And I'd like to turn the meeting over to Mr. Miller to give out tonight's award.
Thank you, Mayor Lampert. It gives me great pleasure to announce that the Paul Robeson House is the choice of council to receive the community recognition for the importance of the history of the house and its residents to the municipality of Princeton, the state of New Jersey, and the United States of America. The Paul Robeson House occupies a unique place in Princeton history as the residence of the Reverend William Drew Robeson when he became pastor of the Witherspoon Presbyterian Church in 1879, and as the first residence for many migrant workers, domestics, and laborers that came to Princeton for work. It was also a gathering place and center of commerce for neighborhood residents. On April 9th, 1898, his first son, Paul Robeson, was born in the house. Paul Robeson attended the Princeton School for Colored Children, Trenton High School, and Rutgers University, where he was an All-American football player. Paul Robeson became world-renowned as an opera star, an actor, and most importantly, in the fight for social justice. The house was repurchased by the Witherspoon Presbyterian Church in 2005 and dedicated as memorial to Paul Robeson, with special emphasis on his commitment to equal rights, social activism, and the plight of the underserved. I'm honored to call forward to receive this certificate of recognition the members of the board of the Paul Robeson House who are here with us this evening. Their work embodies the spirit of the Reverend William Drew Robeson and his son, Paul Robeson. It's through their leadership and the hard work of these women and men that the Paul Robeson House will be brought back to life as both a museum honoring Paul Robeson and a center for the social and cultural development of the residents of the neighborhood and the wider community. And I'd like to ask the members of the board to join me down there, and I will bring the certificate. I think everybody can hear me down here. I'd like to present this certificate to Shirley Satterfield, who is Secretary of the Board of Paul Robeson House, and forward, who is present, couldn't be with us this evening. I recognize many of the members of the board who are here this evening as old friends and people that I've had the pleasure of working with for many years in the council. Shirley, it gives me great pleasure to present this to you.
On behalf of all the members of the Board of Directors and the Advisory Board of the Witherspoon Presbyterian Church, Mayor Lambert, and all the council members, we thank you. I did have a speech, but it's all here, so I won't continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice job, Bernie. Thanks, Mark. So now we come to the public comment portion of our meeting, and we'll start with the sign-up sheet that was on the podium at the beginning of the meeting with Lisa Wu, and then if there's anybody else who'd like to speak on anything that's not already on the agenda, we'll have an opportunity afterwards.
Good evening. This has been more than 4 months since I first attended this meeting, August 7. I still don't have any, I did not receive any answer from Susan, the director of the senior center. I had a conversation with her last Thursday. I would like to know how long gonna take for Princeton Township to bring back the federal lunch program. I need an answer because I will not give up until I see the programs being back in Princeton. So it's more than 4 months. I would like to know how long gonna take. Is that gonna be a year, 2 years?
I know
Can
sorry, no, I know we've been working on it, and I'm going to ask Mr. Grosser to give an update, because I know he's been working on it along with Ms. Hoskins.
Thanks, Mayor. Susan Hoskins actually met with members of this Princeton Senior Resource Nutrition site.
I don't know if your mic is on.
How about now? Better? Approximately 4 to 6 weeks ago to acquire information in terms of what was the best fit for seniors in Princeton to attend the Princeton Nutrition site. At that same time, we sent a list over to the county of questions in terms of what we needed to provide in Princeton to make sure that we were abiding by the Older Americans Act and the nutrition site guidelines that they set forth. We just received those answers back 3 to 4 weeks ago. I have them in front of me. I'm happy to share those with you. And what myself and Susan are doing right now is we're evaluating sites to make sure that those sites fit within the parameters of that nutrition site program. So our expectation is that a nutrition site is going to be up and running first quarter 2018. The reason it's taken so long is because we want to make sure that it's sustainable. It's not going to be just for a few weeks, and it's not just going to be cold meals, which right now, if we did it, it would just be cold meals. And right now, I think the members of the Princeton Senior Nutrition site are going to Lawrence, and they're getting hot meals. So we're trying to make sure that it's sustainable for the long haul.
Excuse me, I did not hear. Which quarter? 2018? First quarter?
First quarter.
It can be January or it's March.
It depends on the sites. I mean, right now we're between a few sites. It depends on whether or not we're going to only do cold meals, which would again be temporary, or we're going to be able to do a hybrid program with cold and warm meals. We're trying to make it where we have warm meals only, but right now it's difficult because you have to have a commercial kitchen. And to have a location Monday through Friday for 4 to 6 hours is not very easy to find. So we're trying to make sure that whatever location we find is suitable for the members that are participating now, but then also able to grow into a larger program. Because right now at the Princeton Senior Resource Center, if we did it there, they would only be cold lunches. And after a little while, it's been shown throughout the county that warm lunches are going to be preferred.
Did you say you have received a reply from county
Yeah.
3 or 4 weeks ago?
3 to 4 weeks ago, we've been evaluating sites since then.
Is that possible I can have a copy of the letter?
Yeah, I'd love to meet with you. We can sit down and go over the answers from them.
Okay, so will you announce
Yeah.
when?
Okay, I think the back and forth doesn't really work at the
Okay.
meeting, but I want to thank you for being an advocate on this issue. I think we all support trying to bring the program back to Princeton and finding a suitable site, and our staff is working on it. Sometimes things take longer than we want them to because we also have to deal with other bureaucracies on the state and county level, but we are working on it, and like Mr. Grosser said, we're hoping to have something in the next few months up and running. So, and you'll be the first person that we will let know when it's up and running, because we know how passionate you are about this issue, and we want to see a solution too.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on an item that's not already on the agenda? All right, seeing no one, I'll close public comment, and we'll move on to the presentation for this evening, which is the Princeton University's campus plan.
Are you ready? Okay. We're delighted to be here this evening with not only the current members of council, but I know behind me the future members of council and members of the planning board, as well as members of the public. I'm Bob Durkee, Princeton University's Vice President and Secretary, and I'm up here this evening with Ron McCoy, the university architect. We have several other colleagues from the university who are here with us, along with Cindy Rottenberg Walker, a partner at Urban Strategies, who has been our lead consultant as we developed a framework to guide our campus planning through 2026 and beyond. I'm going to say a few words by way of introduction and then turn the presentation over to Ron, and all of us will be available then for questions. We began developing the framework in July of 2014, and last week we publicly released it. We appreciated the input we received through the plan's website and the opportunities we had to discuss it with you and other members of the community along the way. This public release marks a milestone in the process, but not its end. The framework is intended to be revisable over time, and while it presents options for development over the next 10 years in a 30-year context, we know that needs, opportunities, and circumstances will change over time, probably even in the next 10 years, but certainly over the next 30. The purpose of campus planning is to suggest where facilities might best be located and what could be done to apply the principles that the framework proposes to guide the evolution of the campus. But questions about whether, when, and how development can occur and improvements can be made will be addressed by two other processes that are currently underway: a capital planning process and a campaign planning process, which together will help determine what we can afford to do and on what timeline. The campus planning framework is comprehensive. There are sections devoted to several of the priority projects that were identified in the strategic planning framework we issued in 2016. A new residential college or colleges to permit the university to expand its undergraduate student body by 10%. New and improved facilities to support teaching and research in engineering and environmental studies. And space to accommodate academic partnerships with the corporate, government, and nonprofit sectors in an expanded innovation ecosystem. But the framework also addresses issues ranging from land use and landscape to sustainability, athletic facilities, space utilization, transportation, parking, and other topics. One priority is to promote cycling, walking, mass transit, and other alternatives to single occupancy vehicles. A strategy that achieves sustainability goals, reduces parking requirements, aligns with community interests, and removes cars from both the campus and neighboring streets. The framework identifies opportunities to improve the already developed portions of our campus, with particular emphasis on enhancing our lands east of Washington Road, and it proposes the development of a new lake campus on lands south of Lake Carnegie that the university purchased almost a century ago. In a few minutes, Ron will say more about our plans for those lands. One section of the framework offers suggestions for a potential residential mixed-use corridor south of the new Lewis Arts Complex. Current zoning would not permit this kind of development, and we hope you will be willing to join us in a discussion about updated zoning in that corridor. I want to close by quoting one, admittedly long, sentence from the concluding section of the framework. This framework envisions a campus with an expanded student body and one or more new residential colleges, substantially expanded and improved space for engineering and environmental studies, a thoroughly reimagined East Campus, a lively and attractive Lake Campus fully integrated into the rest of the university, a geography in which Lake Carnegie has moved from the periphery to the center of campus, enhanced achievements in multiple forms of sustainability, a significant shift from single occupancy vehicles to other modes of transit, including walking, cycling, shuttling, and mass transit, and new academic partnerships in an innovation ecosystem that supports the mission of the university and increases its capacity to have a positive impact on the world. I now turn to Ron McCoy to highlight some aspects of the plan, after which we'll be happy to hear your perspectives and try to answer your questions. Ron?
Thanks, Bob. Good evening. So what I'm going to do is offer a visual tour that reinforces a lot of what Bob just talked about. This will give you, hopefully people have had a chance to look at the plan online, but this will give you a bit of a introduction to the legibility of the plan, how it's organized, how you can navigate around the plan, and along the way touch on some of the key points that Bob just mentioned. On this first slide, I did want to emphasize a few key words. One is the word framework. I think Bob has done a good job explaining that. A framework is a document that provides guidance to the university so we can make decisions, but it also retains a flexible position. So this word framework is really the key, and flexibility around these options are one of the goals that we try to achieve in the plan. Also, just to point out that this is a framework for development through 2026 and beyond. Things that we're going to show you today are things that would happen in 10 or 30-year increments, but some things may not be able to achieve in that time. At the same time, a lot of things that we will be initiating in this phase of the growth of the campus would set the pattern for development in years even beyond that 30-year horizon. I'm going to start just by orienting you to the table of contents. There are 3 pages of in the table of contents, and those 3 pages are intentionally very granular. There's a lot of information provided in that. The goal here is to allow people to find a topic that they're interested in and click on the links that you can see of the page numbers, which will take you right to that page. So it's a highly navigable table of contents. Once you're in the body of the text, there'll be hyperlinks within the body also. So if you're reading something in the text and it references a residential college, you can click on that section of the residential college and then go to a detailed part of that residential college. Backing up a little bit, just in terms of this particular page we're looking at, this page of the table of contents introduces the principles and key elements. Those are essentially the things that we presented back in April. Those key elements are the ones that Bob just articulated, having to do with enabling the expansion of the undergraduate student body population, providing facilities for environmental studies and Cs, and supporting the innovation ecosystem. Distinct from that, project and initiatives on the right-hand column of this, those will provide more detail about how those key elements are integrated into the campus, as well as some broader just campus-making strategies that are part of campus planning that we will use to knit together architecture and landscape throughout the campus plan. On the next page of the table of contents, I'm just going to point to the right-hand side of the column here and indicate the work that we've done regarding sustainability. I'll say more about sustainability later in this presentation, but at this point I wanted to say that the work that we've done within this campus plan is integrated with the university's sustainability plan. The 2008, this information will inform the 2018 sustainability plan, which has not yet been published, but in the work that we've been doing, it has been integrated with Shauna Weber and the work that she has been doing with the sustainability at Princeton. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. Then on the last page of the table of contents are some of the topics that are very essential to forming the campus plan. Land use, really you'll read that and understand components of the land use system. On movement, this is one of the most important topics of the campus plan. We will talk about in that section enhancing pedestrian movement, enhancing cycling, reinforcing and supporting Tiger Transit, ambitions that will connect to the regional transit network, and the vehicular movement throughout campus. As Bob said, one of the most important parts of this campus plan is encouraging a paradigm shift away from single occupancy vehicles. So that's one of the key elements of the plan. And then landscape really will continue to talk about the components of the landscape framework that are within the plan and the importance that landscape plays as an element that creates a sense of place. And then I'll talk about the look ahead on the final slide of this presentation. So this slide just reiterates some of the things that we've talked about, that this is a framework for development for the development that could happen over the next 10 years in the context of developments over 30 years and beyond. I think if you remember back in our presentation in April, this 30-year horizon is important because it allows us to plan things wisely over that period of time so that we don't have to undo initiatives that we start, and also so that we can preserve opportunities over that 30-year period and beyond. We looked at all of the university-related lands, including south of Lake Carnegie in West Windsor. In addition to land use issues, as I just mentioned, we've tackled issues such as sustainability, movement, and infrastructure. The campus plan identifies developments on the campus that's already developed, with particular emphasis on the campus east of Washington Road and south of Lake Carnegie. This next slide illustrates the boundary of those university-related lands, and this was then the scope of the study that we undertook in the campus plan. So you can see the full scope of all that. We've also looked at the Forrestal campus, just so that we can make sure that we're thinking about how to develop the lands that we own there. This obviously, as I said in my opening slide, these are just simply the geographic areas that we planned. This is a lot of land that would take far more than 30 years to develop over time. Let me pause on this plan a little bit. This is really one of the best places to orient yourselves to the campus plan. Now, I would say that I have to point out that this plan has a legend that's attached to it. That legend doesn't show up in this particular slide, but you'll see the numbers that are in the bubbles throughout the plan. Those refer to either the key elements of the plan or some of the projects and initiatives of the plan. And then a little bit additional sort of assistance to understand how this plan is organized. Anything that is shown in these more deeper colored objects here, those are projects that would happen within a 10-year period in which we're more specific and we're testing the massing, the actual form of the massing of those buildings. Things that would happen over a much longer period of time are shown in a sort of mask that you can see right here where the cursor is pointing. Those are simply, rather than having specific information, we're just designating that as an opportunity site for projects that could happen over a longer period of time. This is a slide from the plan that illustrates some of those key initiatives. This one in particular is showing two campus planning strategies. One of them is an east-west connector which connects from the Graduate College across campus over Washington and to the new neighborhood for engineering and environmental studies. So that's an opportunity to enhance that connection across the campus from east to west. There's another one that's shown on this plan which begins at Nassau Street, comes down Olden, jogs through the new neighborhood for environmental studies and sees, then would cross Lake Carnegie on the proposed pedestrian bridge and provide an entrance into the Lake campus. There's also an important entrance into Lake campus off of Washington Road, so there are multiple access points onto that campus. But since I'm showing this slide, this is the first time I'm showing the proposed pedestrian and cycling bridge. This is something that it's very important to be able to connect the initiatives that we have on the Lake campus, which are largely about trying to create a sort of a community with key active uses from the beginning. So graduate student housing, spaces for the innovation ecosystem, academic partnerships, administrative partnerships, and amenities that would support that kind of activity. Also, okay, I'll leave it at that. So this is just a diagram from those key initiatives. Next, I'm going to walk through some of the key elements, and this just puts those in text form. Again, this is reiterating the work that we presented back in April and that Bob just went through, talking about facilities that would support the expansion of the undergraduate student body population by 10%, support through new facilities for research in engineering and environmental studies, and then those facilities, again, to support partnerships with corporate, government, and nonprofit sectors through the expanded innovation ecosystem. The first one I'm going to point to here is the residential college. One of the things I'd like to reiterate with these slides is that these are not designs for buildings. As I said at the beginning, we're testing capacity for sites so that we know that when we identify a site that could be used for a particular program, that we know that the site is large enough to handle that program. So even though this looks like it has some architectural specificity to it, that's simply trying to test the capacity. So no one should leave here thinking that we have a design for any of these facilities. This is illustrating that we could support 2 colleges on the site. If I think you can orient yourselves, this is Poe and Pardee Field, which is at the southern part of the campus. Faculty Road on this slide would be just at the bottom of this campus here. I mean, of the slide right there. The next slide I'm showing here illustrates the neighborhood for the new facilities that could be used for the School of Engineering and Environmental Studies. They are along Ivy Lane and Western Way on the eastern part of the campus. There are obviously existing facilities on that site that would have to be relocated. And I also wanted to point out on this slide, just to reintroduce that north-south connector that goes down and across Lake Carnegie to the new Lake campus. One other thing to point out on this slide is that even though we want to do everything possible to eliminate single occupancy vehicles from their transit to campus, we know that particularly with this development over time for engineering and environmental studies, that some parking would need to be moved off of those parcels, and we have planned for 2 additional levels of parking on that surface parking that we call Lot 21, which is at this corner down here by Faculty Road and Fitz-Randolph. So that's shown on the slide. Adjacent to that, it would be a new satellite plant that would provide sustainable energy for the East Campus developments. Yeah, Bob just asked me to point out a little bit these yellow dashed circles that occur on campus on these diagrams. One of the things that we identified early on as we began to develop the campus plan, and it's one of the key elements that are articulated in the early part of the document, is to recognize that as the campus begins to evolve, it will become sort of polycentric. Right now, the campus tends to gravitate primarily around the Frist Campus Center. That's the primary social node. There's another node that's very active around Firestone Library and Chancellor Green and East Pine. But we wanted to be careful and purposeful in encouraging multiple nodes. And these nodes are places that would bring the community together around activities and programs, but also would sort of support serendipitous encounter. So we're really trying to use that concept of a polycentric campus with multiple nodes to foster a larger sense of community. So this plan illustrates the one that exists at Frist, and we would plan to expand that to make that one even more vibrant, perhaps by adding more additional student life activities in that area. And then as we think about the development of environmental studies and Cs on the east part of the campus, we would have an opportunity to embed or create another node with that development. And then, of course, the Lake campus itself would become one of those nodes that would support community. This slide illustrates really just the stewardship that the trustees have shown over time and the beginning of acquisition of land in West Windsor in 1922. And from the perspective of the trustees who are charged with this sort of responsibility, being able to look forward to the future land that the university might need over time. And at the time that this was purchased, they thought it might be necessary in 50 years. We might have started to develop a cross-country track over there in that amount of time. But now, at this point in time in the evolution of the campus, the stewardship of the trustees has become very valuable, as it gives us an opportunity to satisfy some of the strategic goals that the university has at this particular time. This then shows another view of that site. I think you can all orient yourselves to Lake Carnegie here. So we're looking toward the north, toward the campus. Route 1 would be just behind us in this view. And this shows the arrival of that pedestrian cycling bridge onto the Lake Campus site right about here, and also shows that second connection to Washington Road right through here. And it illustrates, this slide also has with it in the document another legend. That legend simply identifies all the buildings you see here, but this arc of buildings here would be sites for the graduate housing, some of the academic and administrative partnerships that we've talked about in that innovation ecosystem. There are also facilities shown here for athletics on the eastern side of that arcing lawn. And then surface parking, which is another piece of the puzzle to solve parking growth over time. In this case, that parking would be connected to a transit hub, and that transit hub would provide access to the shuttle service, the Tiger Transit shuttle service. But we'd also have bike share there, and perhaps some of the amenities that I talked about that would support the sense of community on this campus. Another bit of orienting device. This lane, if you know that part of the campus right now, this is called Tiger Lane. That's an existing road that cuts east-west across the site that's currently used for contractor parking. We could take advantage of the mature trees on that road and create a sort of stronger sense of place by developing along that. And then further toward Route 1, the plan opens up to a larger meadow here, and that meadow would surround the existing Penn's Neck Cemetery and provide pathways for cycling and pedestrians all the way to Route 1. And we're currently working on, we've connected this to the Princeton Community Bicycle Master Plan, and we're tying this to the Regional Bicycle Master Plan. So we're pretty confident that this would be a fantastic way to get all the way to Princeton Junction through this pathway, crossing Route 1 at Fisher Place, which is about the safest place currently that one can cross Route 1. People always ask us what the distances are from this campus, and so we've done this diagram. This little spot right here is that intersection of Tiger Lane with the center of the Lake Campus development. And that's, as you can see here, that's about a 10-minute walk over to the athletics neighborhood on the north side of the lake. Or by bike, it would be a 10-minute bike ride up here to Nassau Street. I'd point out that for the graduate student community that would develop here, that their location from this site to where a lot of their activity is along Washington Road or over in either the existing engineering or the new neighborhood for engineering or environmental studies, this site is closer to that east side of the campus than either the graduate college on the west side or Lawrence or Lakeside. So we think this has a very good location on campus. A couple minutes ago, I referred to the diagram, the cycling network. This is far too detailed to understand in a presentation like this, but I just am using this to illustrate the fact that we have been working with the town and integrating our campus cycling master plan with the town's cycling network. And so this diagram, you'll see this in the report online, it shows the cycling network. Obviously, when we're developing new parts of the campus, we have an opportunity to really create the kinds of facilities that would serve a cycling network around campus. And then on the existing parts of the campus, we're obviously going to have to do some other work to support those kinds of facilities. So in terms of sustainability, there's a lot of information in the plan. This is a bit of a diagram that stands for the way we've been thinking about how to integrate sustainability into the plan. We've identified goals and impact indicators. So on the right, on the left, you see the primary objectives of sustainability that are part of the campus plan. And on the right-hand side of this plan, you'll see the targets that, or the indicators that will allow us to measure the success of reaching the priorities that we've established on the left-hand side. And these crossing lines are simply to say that this is a holistic strategy, that everything on the left is connected to all the elements on the right, and vice versa. The elements on the right, being identified here as the impact indicators, will have behind them measurable targets. Now, we're still developing those measurable targets. Then behind those measurable targets, once we've established those measurable targets, we can develop planning strategies that will allow us to achieve those measurable targets that will then advance our sustainability objectives for the plan. The last slide I wanted to talk about is this look ahead, and it's in this last page of the plan that you'll find that somewhat large sentence that Bob read in his comments. But I think that to reiterate some of the key elements is that this is a framework, and it provides, helps the university make wise and well-informed decisions over time. It has flexibility built into it, but it does indicate some evolution of the campus. Particularly, I'd reinforce the change in geography with the creation of the Lake Campus, a holistic approach to sustainability, changing the transportation paradigm to move away from single occupancy vehicles, and then fundamentally really supporting the strategic objectives of the university. So with that, I think that we're available for questions.
Yeah, I would just say, it's a 160-page roughly document. We did not attempt to cover all of it here. There's a lot of detail in there, but I think we've tried to identify the principal themes, and happy to take any questions or comments now at this point.
Great, thank you. Anybody want to start? Ms. Butler?
Yes, I had a question about the east-west connector. How do we, is that a automobile?
That's a good question. That's just
Thanks.
just a campus pathway. We're just enhancing that campus pathway. It would be a sidewalk along College Road. It would enter campus. We would try to adjust some of the development that could happen along that pathway to make that east-west connectivity stronger. Right now, this is kind of in the weeds of campus making, but if you're on the, say, the west side of campus and you want to walk to the east side of the campus, the middle of the campus is a bit congested with the area around Wilson College. The pathways are not as clear and intuitive as they are on other parts of the campus. So this would be an opportunity to enhance the clarity and ease of navigability through the campus for pedestrians and for cyclists, but definitely not for automobiles.
Okay, that was it. So,
Although, Ron, once you cross Washington Road,
yes,
the east-west connector actually becomes what's now Ivy Lane Western Way.
Right.
And so there, you want to say a word about what that might look like?
well,
or Cindy
and
might
it's
want to say-
also you're not, where there are cars now, you're not eliminating them, like
Correct. That's why
College
I wanted to,
Road and...
No, that's why I wanted to.
Precisely, that's right. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that there would be an aspiration to reconfigure the right-of-way of at least Ivy Lane and Western Way to make it much more pedestrian-friendly than it is today, but certainly no intention to remove vehicular traffic. Yeah, really what we call a more complete street. Yeah.
The same thing's true. You could ask the same question about what Ron described as the north-south connector, where
Yes.
some of it is pedestrian and cyclist, some of it would have vehicular components. Depends where you are on that connector. Where there are vehicles, though, I think we would say in every case what Cindy just said, that improving the design, improving the landscape, improving the pedestrian experience is a part of the strategy.
Mr. Carmelo?
Do you want to talk a little bit about Harrison, the plan? I mean, it's showing on the map that you've reconfigured it, so isn't it? Or is that not in the future?
So one of the things, I think I know the question. Let me start answering it. One of the things we've thought about over the longer term, and I think we talked about this a little bit here before, is that maybe to start with the largest question.
Bob, can you just lower the mic or get closer to it because you keep dropping out?
Okay, am I on? Am I in? Okay. One of the things we've talked about before is that over the longer term, particularly as we think about developing the Lake Campus, it would be really nice to make some pretty significant improvements to traffic patterns along Route 1. And when I say along Route 1, I mean actually both along Route 1 and across Route 1. So as we've looked longer term, one of the things we talk about in the plan is the possibility that the time may be coming when what ought to happen at Harrison is comparable to what happened 20 years ago at Alexander. That is, it may be time to go back to some conversations that a number of us were part of years ago about how you could create an overpass at Harrison that would improve, as I say, traffic along Route 1 and crossing Route 1. To do that, you have to think about the alignment of Harrison. And so one of the things that is shown in some of the diagrams is the possibility that existing Harrison would remain as a residential street, but there might be a kind of new Harrison a little bit to the west of it that would link up with the overpass. If you think about the right alignment for linking up to an overpass. And there were some designs, as I say, developed, as I recall, now, getting close to 15, 16, 17 years ago, for thinking about how to do that overpass. So there is an idea that at some point, this would all, of course, have to happen on university lands, but that there is a way to create a kind of new Harrison that would link up with the overpass. This is, excuse the pun, down the road a bit, but that's what I think that's what you're seeing.
I would just say that obviously something like this requires a lot of partners from the state, but what we're trying to do is make sure that we're mindful of that and we're planning for the opportunity if it was to arise.
And I think just the last thing I would add is really, I think the benefit of being able to take this 30-plus year look out is that we can understand how the university can contribute to the bigger challenges that have long been under discussion. And I think that this is a perfect example of what Ron and Bob have both described as a revisable framework over time. So this is one idea among many in terms of how this could be accomplished, but we felt it was useful to show that there would be a solution that would have a lot of technical merit.
Well, just to pile on a little bit, to illustrate it, if you thought a day may come, and Cindy's exactly right, you'd need to be at a point where the state was willing to do something like this. But if you thought a day would come when you wanted to realign Harrison, the last thing you'd want to do is start building structures right now that would make it difficult to relocate Harrison. So it's a good example of what happens a lot in this plan, where you say, make sure you know that could happen in the future, so you don't locate something where you're going to be sorry you located it.
Let other people go.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, congratulations on this. It's been a long and obviously a very thoughtful process on the university's part, and I think that what we're seeing here, when we get into the weeds, I'm sure there'll be a more fulsome comment, but I see this as consistent with our community values as a town in emphasizing new circulation patterns and bike ped and sustainability being infused here. So just two questions. I noticed that the Alexander corridor calls for potentially a hotel, which is very exciting for us. I think just to be clear, that would be on our side of would that be in Princeton or in West Windsor? There was a media report that had the potential hotel, which I know is in the potential building area, as being a media report had it in West Windsor, and
there are.
Is there any clarity on whether it will be in West Windsor or Princeton?
There's no clarity as to whether there would be a hotel. But
the potential hotel.
Yeah. So it's a good illustration of one of the key points of the framework. So Both of those are identified in this framework as places where you could imagine a hotel at some point, if a hotel made sense at some point. So the Alexander corridor is one, and the Lake Campus is another. So it is mentioned in both places, but again, that would depend first on a decision that there was need for a hotel, and then you'd have to think about where the right location was. Both are options.
Thank you. My other question is about William Street and 185 Nassau. You're showing a sort of mixed, what you're calling a complete streets, that concept here that appears to have cars, bikes, and pedestrians all in the same road. Is that the intention? So would that be limited use vehicles, or anyone could drive their car
So
through?
again, we understand that's a public street, so that would be a conversation in terms of what was the right balance. But I think that the recognition is that it is already a very important street for all modes, and it could function much better than it does today, and also could just frankly be more beautiful. So I think that the images that are in the campus plan indicate something which is happening in lots of locations, including my home city of Toronto, where the description is a Wernerf or a complete street, where things are tame just by virtue of the fact that many modes kind of share the same space, and it really just slows everything down for the best. So I think that that's our vision, but again, of course, we understand that that's a conversation that needs to happen with the town at the right time.
Very exciting concept, and one that many of us would embrace, I think.
If I can just say one thing about the question about the site for the hotel, on the Princeton side along the Alexander corridor, this, just to reiterate Bob's point, this would be in that RMU neighborhood that would benefit from a conversation about rezoning.
Yes, we couldn't do it now.
Okay.
The conversation worth having.
Thank you. It's a very comprehensive report and a lot to digest. A couple of questions. First of all, I think from one of the charts that Ron showed, the former Gulf Station at the corner of Route 1 and Washington Road shows as being on university land. Is that correct? Is it university property?
No.
The map showed the university property going all the way out to Route 1 at that corner. And I'm wondering...
We've carved out
who
there,
I
right?
yell at getting the construction fence.
We have a
down.
very strategic white
Yeah.
You can see the
dot
carve
right
out.
there.
The other chart that you had that showed the university properties took it all the way out to Route 1. So maybe you ought to notch it, and
We did, yeah, you'll
we'll
see
go
it.
find the owner and yell at the right person.
Okay.
The second
As Tim says, when you get down in the weeds, you find all kinds of things.
The second is more in the nature of a comment about the realignment of Harrison Street. Moving Harrison Street in the direction that you've shown solves a problem that has plagued both West Windsor and Princeton for a long, long time, and that is that Harrison Street, for about 100 yards or so up from Route 1, tends to go underwater.
Yeah.
And in some of the very severe storms that we've had, that whole area there has gone underwater and has cut the town off from access to the new hospital. And I think you'll find by relocating it in the direction that you have, that you've solved another problem that may not have been the problem you tried to solve. But
Actually, if I could just comment on that, it was intentional, and I think Ron has come to exactly the right slide, which is resiliency is not described in its full set of characteristics. There's a focus in terms of the way in which it's being measured, but you're absolutely right. That was very much on our mind as something that created extra capacity in the network and also had the possibility of avoiding that particular issue around being cut off.
And one final question, I guess, in this case. Reading the University Bulletin over the weekend, I noticed that the university is starting a new accelerator, innovation accelerator, on the Forrestal campus, 31,000 square feet, I believe, meeting rooms, conference rooms, laboratories, wet and dry laboratories. That doesn't appear in this plan. It doesn't appear in a previous plan. Where does that fit in?
Yeah. I'm going to, if Kristen wants to add to this, I'd be happy to have her do that. As we've been working through issues related to innovation and entrepreneurship, one of the things that we needed was a space with wet labs for that purpose. And the site at Forrestal was one that where we could bring in someone who could provide that for members of our faculty and students. So that's what we've done. But I don't know, Kristen, do you want to say more about that?
So Bernie, you are correct. There are plans to build a facility. Actually, the construction is nearing completion for something called the Princeton Innovation Center, partnering with a group called BioLabs that has sites across the country. I think the primary reason it's not in the report that you see there is because it's in space that's not owned by the university, and the report was planning for space owned by the university. So it's going into space in Forrestal Center, but not in space that's owned by the university. But it's certainly part of the innovation ecosystem and some of the early initiatives that are being undertaken.
I'll be talking about economic development from the perspective of the town a little later this evening. And as I have in earlier conversations that I've had with you and with Bob Durkee, I'd like to encourage the university to start thinking about the possibility of locating wet and dry laboratories and innovation space in the municipality rather than out of town in a remote location. And I'd suggest to you that there are locations in town that are closer to amenities, closer to shopping, and probably even closer to campus than Forrestal Center. And I'd like to suggest that the university give some thought to that.
Agree.
Fair point.
Thank you. It was a great plan, and it's a lot of reading. You were able to give us the material earlier, and it's also, I guess, online and so forth. A few things. You mentioned the Lake campus, and I know you mentioned the transit hub, which was great, and then you mentioned something briefly in regard to athletic programs. Now, could this be used by the town, like Dillon Gym is also today, by like the rec department and so forth? Is that another feasible location coming on board that the town may can use at times also?
Well, let me start the answer to that. One of the things that, one of the very first things that is likely to happen if we're able to go ahead with the expansion of the undergraduate student body is the development of the residential college or colleges. That displaces what is now the home for softball and for varsity tennis and the recreational tennis courts. And so they would be among the first occupants of a Lake campus. We want to be really careful as we think about the Lake campus to design and develop it in a way where there's a critical mass of activities out there. So that's why it's so important to us to include the graduate student housing and the other spaces that are out there along with athletics. It would mean, for example, one of the things that would be out there would be what are our recreational tennis courts, and to the extent that folks who use them now where they are, which is where the residential colleges would be, they would be able to use them there. Whether over time there are ways to work with other local entities to make use of this space is, something we'd have to look at just as we look at now. As you know, there's a fairly active use of some of our facilities now. What would be nice is that these would be in a location where they are, a number of athletic facilities would be co-located. There is a proposal, it is one of the number 4s on that design, for a space where there would be training rooms and coaches' offices and other kinds of space to support the athletic programs. And the fact that the transit hub is there also means that there's a place where people can gather before and after they use the athletic facilities. So we anticipate a very lively campus out there. And over time, expect that there would be more and more of the athletic program out there. One of the things we say in the report is that, Baker Rink is probably either coming to the end of its natural life or already has. And so, a day may come when the right plan is to relocate ice hockey out there, and you could do it with 2 sheets of ice, which is what, our teams would like. But that also opens more capacity than we have now for skating. You want to add to?
Just to say that Baker Rink's a good example because that is a facility that is used by a lot of community organizations. And so putting that over time on a location out here with surface parking nearby, transit connections, that could be a good easy and convenient for the community to use.
Thank you.
Finish, Lance? Okay, thank you. So on this slide, is the area 5, I guess, is that what you're envisioning as parking, did you say?
Surface parking, yes.
Okay. It's got all those lovely green
Yes.
Yes.
things on it now, but it's really
That's-
surface parking?
With sustainability.
It's a
And then-
high-performance surface parking
I'm
lot.
sorry?
High-performance surface parking lot in terms of making sure the water that runs from it is clean. I couldn't hear you. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just the trees are intentional. It's part of the requirement to build a parking lot of that scale and meet the sustainability targets that Ron referenced in terms of the quality and quantity management of water that runs off the parking lot, and also to shade it. So that is actually a very careful part of the design.
Okay, okay. But I was noticing on, don't change the slide, but a couple of things. On Ivy Lane, you have some buildings up that aren't currently there. And I think they're mostly on what's now parking lots, right? Is that?
Correct.
So
Yes.
that parking's gone from the interior, and it looks like you're moving it out, which is all good. But with the reorientation of campus toward the lake, I'm just wondering about the people who work. Are you expecting that they're going to, like, people who live in Montgomery or in Princeton, are they driving out to park out in this lot to go back into town? And is there any similar, somebody who might be coming in off 27 or in off 206, is there a similar transit at that end so that they're not driving through the town to get out to the lake campus?
Yeah, let me say 3 things in response to that, and I'll see if Ron or Cindy want to add. Just to start with the parking lots along Ivy Lane, Western Way. As Ron said, one of the proposals for the east part of campus is to create a structured parking on what is now Lot 21.
Right.
And that would essentially accommodate all of the existing parking on Ivy Lane, Western Way, plus the existing parking on Lot 21. It's a small number of spaces in addition to that. But essentially, it keeps the amount of parking in that area about where it is now. So for those who would be going into that area, it's about the same. It's just that they'd be in the structure rather than on the lots. The question was raised actually recently and interestingly about those who come to campus from the north. Now, that's not our largest group by any means, as I think we've talked about before. The largest group is coming up from either the south or the west. And so the lot on the lake campus is a good location for them. And one of the reasons that we created the driveway from Alexander into the west garage was so that the folks coming from the north didn't have to go all the way down anymore to Faculty Road and in through the campus to get into that garage. They can get in right now directly through the arts complex. So that helps with that group. Third point, the question was raised the other day. We had a conversation about whether in time there could be another collector lot of some kind more to the north.
Right.
Particularly as we get a more robust transit system through town, where folks could do the same thing there as here. It's not part of the plan at this point, but I think it's an interesting idea, and I think it's something we've talked about, even though there's nothing in the plan.
We've got a lot we can sell you.
You've got what? A lot we can sell us?
We've got a lot we can sell, yeah.
Well, we just have one we gave you.
Did you have another question? Oh.
Yes, one other question about the fields. When you said that you're trying to create a critical mass out there of athletic fields, and so if people are going out there to watch games, does that mean you're also looking to have restaurants and places where people can buy food, delis, et cetera, in that?
I want to be a little careful about the plural in that sentence. I think, we need to be aware of the number of people out there. But yes, the idea is that there would be at least a restaurant, there would be a coffee shop, there would be maybe a small grocery store, there would be amenities like that for people who are living out there, people who are commuting through there. So that is the idea. No, we don't know the specifics yet, but the idea is to develop it so that it has a bit of a community feel to it, as we've tried to do at, not quite on the same scale, but at Lakeside. There's a nice, strong community feel there. But out here we have a graduate student population, but we also, as I say, we have commuters coming in, our commuters coming in and out through this site. We have people going to the athletic events coming through this site. We have people working in office buildings there coming through this site. I don't know what the capacity will be to support these amenities, but we think it's an important part of the plan. Cindy or Ron?
Yeah, I think I would just build on that. I think it's probably obvious from what Bob has said, but it's very intentional, this mix of uses, because as we all know, they're active at different times of the day and the week, and that's the best possible scenario to support some of these commercial uses that Bob has outlined, possible restaurant, possible fitness kind of activity, food store. And I think that the vision for the Lake Campus is, of course, to meet Princeton's needs, but also to be really a part of the bigger community fabric. So it would be a very contemporary opportunity to understand how you mix university and other community activity. Obviously, improve facilities to the DNR Canal is another part of the vision, the ability to provide perhaps some supportive parking, but certainly better trail connections to the existing canal towpath. So I think all of that just contributes to the vitality and use of this new part of campus for lots of audiences.
Is one of your
Nodes, yeah.
nodes.
Yeah, right.
And do you, not having looked through the entire plan, I'm sorry, do you have a drawing where all the nodes are? So,
Right.
like, is the arts a node?
Yeah,
Is that
it
a node?
actually is.
It's like all of a sudden it feels like the stepchild since you've moved across, since you're moving across the lake.
Yeah, the arts is definitely a node.
And then, as Ron mentioned, there are smaller nodes or activity centers on campus. They're not all called out specifically in the plan, so you use the example of Frist.
Right,
right. But the higher order activity places do definitely include the Arts and Transit node, which has come to be a very successful place of bringing communities together.
I remember, I don't know if it was a year ago, I thought there was a plan for an office building behind the gas station on Washington and Route 1, and now I see that you've bought that. Is that, so is there going to be no office building there now? And as a corollary, are there going to be any office buildings? Do you see that office buildings in the future anywhere here?
So let me begin to answer that by saying that the very first half hour of her birthday on Friday, this is from midnight until 12:30 in the morning, Kristen was at a West Windsor planning board meeting on this very topic. And so let me ask Kristen to answer the question.
Thanks, Bob. So yes, it was a happy birthday. So it was actually West Windsor Zoning Board. And there was an application by the current owner, who is an out-of-state owner of that less than quarter-acre parcel, which is where the former Gulf Station was located. And they were at the point of asking for a more than 4,000 square foot two-story building there. Yes. Multiple variances. The short story is they were denied the application at about 12:30 a.m. on December 8th, my birthday. There is a prior non-conforming use, which is the gas station. So to be seen, but the application that was pending was denied.
Okay, I thought it showed on the plan that the university owned that property.
No, I think
that does not.
No, I think
Okay.
if you look that slide, there was the little
Okay.
corner there. It's less than a quarter acre.
Oh, wow, okay.
So there was a little white dot there, but I think there was a black line over top of it.
Yeah, as I said to Bernie before, how we ended up not owning that little I don't know. This is a good piece of history
I would have
for us
thought
to
that
look
would
into.
have been a natural gateway to the campus.
Well, as you saw from Ron's slide, that land was bought essentially in 3 different purchases, and all of the lands from Washington West were purchased in 22. Why the 48 purchase didn't include that little corner, I don't know. I guess the farmer who owned that farm at the time didn't own that little corner. But that's it. This is actually the first time I focused on the fact that we don't know why that little piece is carved out, but it is.
Never too late to purchase it.
Back into the archives.
I wanted to just say I'm really excited, especially about the transportation piece of this plan, and I appreciate how you looked at the town's bike plan and fit your bike plan into that. So the town is about to embark on a climate action plan, and we're relooking at our sustainability plan that's nearing about 10 years now. And my question is what's the best way for us to work together on both of those, both the sustainability aspects of this and also the transportation? Because I do feel like those are 2 areas where I think our goals are aligned in so many ways, and I think we're more sustainable actually if we work together on these things. So how is it best for us to work together with you on those?
Well, I think that we have been, several university representatives have been participating in the town's bicycle master plan. So I think whatever grows out of that effort, if we can continue to be a partner in that, we're more than willing and eager to do that. As we begin to think about any improvement over time, as these east-west connectors or north-south connectors, if they begin to take shape, then we would engage with you so that we can do some pre-planning to make sure that whatever we plan in terms of cycling is something that's consistent with what the town would want to do. But I think already we're starting by saying that we're committed to trying to overlay and integrate anything that we do for cycling and master planning with the work that the town's doing. On the sustainability side, I'd say that let us finish some final work on sustainability and produce our 2018 sustainability report. I think fundamentally we can begin a series of conversations just to share the knowledge that we've learned. I mean, we've done a lot of research around all the different sort of aspects of sustainability, and if we can just begin to share what we've done as knowledge, that might be the beginning of sharing opportunities where we can work together.
I would just add that one of the reasons we were pleased to have a chance to come and talk tonight, it's only a week since we released the plan, is to make sure everyone's aware of all of the different components, so that where there's an interest in follow-up, working together, and Liz, I completely agree on a lot of these, particularly in the sustainability area, neither you nor we are going to be as successful as we want to be unless we do this together. The short answer is always, if you identify an area where you'd like to work more together, that's when you get in touch with Kristen. Right? And so she can make sure she knows how to make the right, and she does, how to make the right linkages with whoever on campus ought to be part of the discussions and whoever in town ought to be part of the discussions. But I will tell you, and you know people like Kim and Shayna Weber, they want to be involved in what's going on in the community. So if anything is needed to make that connection, that's what Kristen and her office are doing all the time.
Mayor, I think Mr. McCoy accepted the Environmental Commission's invitation to come to a meeting, I think in February, the February meeting of the Environmental Commission. So that conversation is starting where the sustainability, we're not expecting the report to be done by that time, but I think that there's a great desire among the commissioners to begin a conversation with the university to learn what's going on campus and how the town and the university can partner.
Are there any other further questions? All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you
And
so
this
much.
is available online, I assume, on the Princeton site?
Actually, in multiple formats.
Okay. Oh, just before you go, I know there's several members of the planning board here.
Oh, yes.
Any of you have any questions you want to ask? No? Okay. To be continued. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
All right. So tonight's a pretty interesting meeting, actually. We have not only the university's presentation, but we have a couple of reports coming up. The first is a report from our Economic Development Task Force, and I'm going to turn it over to Councilman Miller, and then that's going to be followed by an update on the parking study. So people are welcome to stay, but you don't have to.
And I'm going to move down there so that I can talk from
That's it.
Yeah, hey, where we go? Okay, how do I advance the view graph?
Let's get it.
Next, where's the next?
Just should be able to just hit the arrow, up or down.
Up or down? Okay.
Let's get you in the right view here.
Thank you. I'm going to talk rather briefly this evening, not nearly as long as our friends from the university did, about economic development and the work of the Economic Development Task Force.
Bernie, I think you just have to go right.
Not close
into
enough? Is that
microphone.
better?
That's better.
Okay, good. I'm going to present an overview of the work that the Economic Development Task Force accomplished starting from the latter part of 2016 and through this year. And while my view graphs won't be as colorful as those that the university had, I hope they'll provide at least as much substance as was provided in the university's view graphs. And I'm going to assume that the up arrow means next view graph. And it doesn't. Try this one. There we go. The task force consisted of the mayor as chair, Joe Butler, myself as council members, and Patrick Simon also participated in the task force during 2016. We were assisted by several members of the municipal staff, our administrator, our zoning officer, and our planner, and other members of the municipal staff from time to time. And in the following charts, I'll talk pretty briefly about how we approached the opportunity for economic development and the preliminary findings of the work to date. The first question that we all need to ask ourselves is, thank you. The first question that we all need to ask ourselves is, why are we looking at economic development for Princeton? If you talk to people in Mercer County or in other municipalities in the county, other municipalities in the other counties that surround us, they'll all be very quick to say that we in Princeton have a real unique position in the economy of Mercer County and the region. We have a strong and resilient economy in Princeton for a lot of reasons. Much stronger and much more resilient than many other municipalities in the county and around us. However, there are both national trends and regional trends that are having an effect on our economy. And one of the purposes of the work that we did this year was to try and identify what those trends are and what the impacts might be, particularly on the question of the revenue that the municipality receives from property taxes. And the next thing we tried to do is define what we meant by economic development. And we took a very, very simple viewpoint of economic development. What we are looking for, or what we were looking for in economic development, was to maintain or increase the non-residential property tax revenue while maintaining the unique character of the town. In other words, we're not looking to change the character of Princeton as a town, but we are looking to either sustain the balance between residential property tax revenue and non-residential property tax revenue, or to increase the non-residential property tax revenue. There are a lot of models of economic development, and they're written about all the time in the business section of the newspapers. And there's some pretty good examples. Redevelopment of abandoned industrial buildings. All you've got to do is go into Trenton and look at the Roebling complex in Trenton, or ride the train into New York. And you see what is happening in a lot of communities with abandoned industrial buildings. They're being converted for residential use, they're being converted for mixed use, but they're being converted. Another model for economic development is the rezoning and development of farmland for industrial and commercial use. And a good example of that is the development that's taken place around exit 8A of the New Jersey Turnpike. All the warehouses that have been built on what used to be potato fields in and around exit 8A. As I'll talk about a little more later, those models exist, but we neither have abandoned industrial buildings, nor do we have a lot of large, many acres of farmland that could be converted for commercial use. A third model is a model of using science, technology, and social entrepreneurship to drive economic development. Good examples: Silicon Valley, what's going on in New York, Pittsburgh, Chicago, St. Louis, and many, many other communities. We have the possibility of some of that here, and some of it relates back to the question that I asked our friends from the university about the 31,000 square foot accelerator that they're building out at Forrestal. That is the kind of thing that fits into science, technology, and social entrepreneurship. One of the things we tried to do in the work of the task force was to find out what the concerns are of our stakeholders, the business community, the real estate community, the members of other boards, committees, and commissions, and what are their concerns. We heard quite a bit from the business community. We also sought out Mercer County and state agencies that can help, and we found that we were not far enough along with the work that we were doing to be able to look to any of those agencies for help. They're looking for somebody to come to them with a package that they want to help market, and we're not there yet. We also tried to do an inventory of what our assets are. And This is a partial list of our assets. You'll find a much more complete list in the report. And we do have a lot of assets that fit into economic development. We have superb educational institutions in town, ranging all the way from elementary school to independent schools to institutions of higher learning, and also a world-class research university that's the largest employer, the largest property taxpayer, and the largest tax-exempt institution in our town. We've got a compact, walkable downtown. It's an attraction. It draws people. We have a wide range of retail and food establishments. We have historic sites, and we have lots of cultural amenities. In fact, many, many more cultural amenities than you would expect to find in a town the size of Princeton. The kinds of things you'd find in a small city or in a large city, but certainly many more than you expect to find in a town of some 28,000 to 29,000 people. Our location is great. We're in the geographic center of the Philadelphia-New York corridor, and we have access to rail transportation, through rail transportation to an international airport, to a regional airport, and to the interstate highways. We've got superb parks. We've got walking trails, and we have a good active recreation facilities. And as our colleagues from the university pointed out in their presentation, we do have some opportunities for rezoning service zones for mixed-use development, what the university called RMU development. However, we do not fit neatly into any conventional model of economic development. So where did we wind up this year? We looked at what the municipality can do to help retail in Princeton, and we're doing a lot. We're trying to make it easier to start a business in town, trying to make the permitting process neater, cleaner, and faster. But we can't solve the problem that the retail business in this town and every other town faces, which is the shift from brick and mortar to online retail purchasing. What can we do to help improve the occupancy of office space in Princeton? Again, we can't solve the problem that's created by the fact that there is a surplus of office space all around us and in town. But we can work with realtors who are trying to fill the to fill the office space in Princeton and help them in whatever way we can to provide them with information about the assets that we have that would draw people into those offices. We do have assets that fit into the conventional models of economic development. And some of those might come about through redevelopment of the service zones into mixed use being some retail, some offices, small offices, and some residential. Big question. We all saw the university's campus plan this evening. How is the campus development going to affect our opportunities for economic development? The university has operated with a model that has kept certain of their properties on the tax roll, other of their properties as tax exempt. Some of the properties that they talked about as going into West Windsor are the kinds of facilities that in the past have been maintained by the university on the tax roll in the municipality. And some of the properties that they've talked about placing on this side of the campus, particularly undergraduate housing, do not show up on our tax roll. So I think that this is something that has to be carefully examined going forward. And I would suggest that as we talked about working closely with the university on a sustainability plan, we cannot do an economic development plan without the participation of the university and probably without the participation of the other large not-for-profit educational institutions in town, but particularly because of the size of the university, the amount of development that the university does, and the attraction that the university presents to visitors and to visit for both cultural reasons and for business reasons. It's necessary that we work closely with the university when we do our economic development. And the task force recommends that the work of the task force should be continued and should be directed toward preparing a Princeton economic development plan that uses our economic assets as the foundation for the plan. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernie. That was terrific. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. Beautiful job, Councilman Miller. Question I have, there's a bill that I read today somewhere in the Assembly that will allow towns, if it goes through, for anyone 60 years and older, they could do volunteer work for the municipality, and that would reduce their property taxes. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I'm just wondering if that's something that may work in Princeton.
You know, I heard about that for the first time this morning, and I'm not even sure where it stands in the state legislature. Interesting
Well, we
idea.
would lose money then, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. They're saying that this should boost your economy. I don't know. Every town has to pick. Every town can either take this or leave it.
But wait, what is it for?
It's for a reduction of property taxes. If you're 60 or older, then you can volunteer.
As I heard it described,
I don't know how that would boost the economy.
It's a bill that would permit people over 60 to volunteer to work for the municipality and to effectively work off $1,000 of their property tax. And my guess is it's not going to go very far.
The other question I have, when you last you listed assets for Princeton, I know 3 business people now that came here because of the education system for their kids, and they have businesses. So that may be one of your assets. Could be the Princeton education system, public education system.
Well, I think I mentioned the public schools. I didn't go into a lot of detail about it, but if you look in the report, I think you'll find that I say that the public schools are rated amongst the top 5 in the state, and probably in the top 100 in the country.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You know, you talked about the trend with retail. Did you also talk about the trend of millennials not wanting to live in places like Princeton? They want to live in larger cities?
No, I didn't talk about that. And I've read that they want to live in walkable cities. They want to live close to bars. They want to live close to entertainment. But I've also read that after they have their first or second kid, they want a lawn and a sandbox in the backyard.
We
and
did talk.
Well, I mean,
and they begin to look like us.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know that I think some employers that have a harder time at attracting talent because of that. That's what I've heard.
We did talk about, I mean, it came up from time to time as part of the discussion on the committee, but they're really, we can only be what we are.
Yeah,
and,
that's why I know. I mean, but I feel that way about a lot of the parts of this economic development. Like, it's hard to know what we can actually do, especially when our rents are pretty high compared to the other towns, so we can't do things like offer tax breaks. That's the opposite of what we want to do.
Right. We don't have a lot of room to offer tax incentives. We also don't have a lot of undeveloped space. So, you know, we really are limited in what we can do to attract more businesses.
But obviously, we want to try. So, I mean, I think it's a good idea.
I mentioned cultural attractions in the town. There are a lot of them, but they're not particularly directed toward millennials.
Yeah, I would just add, so one thing we talked about in our meeting with some of the university folks was the desire for something like a live music venue, which we don't really have right now. I mean, the fact is like we have a lot of millennials, and maybe they were even younger than millennials, in town because of the university. And one thing we heard over and over again is that the university and the presence of the university is the biggest draw for economic development, because people tend to start businesses where they live. It's not like people are sitting around thinking, where should I move to start my business? It's like they're here, and so you want to capitalize on that. And we have a lot of intellectual capital, both, and this is one of the other assets we had on the list, is like both at the university and within the community, that would make it potentially appealing. But again, I think it's just how do we have a really good sense of who we are and what we can offer? And I think we're not going to be able to be everything to everybody. But it seems like there's opportunities here to capitalize on what we do have to offer, which is a lot, and I think is very desirable if we can find that right match.
Could I ask Bernie a question now that we've heard the campus plan tonight, whether or not you have any reaction to it in light of the sort of things that we talked about in terms of the economic development?
Well, I think we've got to draw the university into the economic development work that we're doing. It's got to be done together with the university. If it's done separately, the development of the campus can either have a beneficial effect on the economics of the town or a detrimental effect on the economics of the town. If we wind up with all of the tax-exempt parts of the university in town, and the taxable parts of the university are across on the other side of the lake, then it's going to hurt us. There's absolutely no question about it.
Agree.
If the university develops a retail node on the other side of the lake, those people are going to shop there. They're not going to shop on Nassau Street. They're not going to shop in the shopping center. It's going to hurt us. Somehow or another, we've got to be linked. And if we're not linked, there's a much larger chance that what is going to come out of the campus plan, while it will improve the appearance of the campus, it'll make the campus more attractive, it'll draw more students to Princeton, it may not be beneficial economically to the town. And I think that's going to be a hard job to make it happen.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that it's an excellent plan for Princeton University. It makes a lot of sense for them, but it does appear that the sort of centerpiece of the campus over the next 30 years is going to be like Carnegie, and which means that it's not the center of, it's not our cute little college town. And I think it makes all the sense in the world for them. There's more space, there's Route 1, for all the reasons I think that they're doing it. But I do think, as Bernie said, we're going to have more of the non-taxable infill within the community, more students, more fire, more police, more road, more demands on our kind of infrastructure, if you will. That's fine, but the tax generating stuff is going across the lake. So that lake campus is actually West Windsor. So,
No question about it. If it happens as described, we're going to remain a college town with a quasi-urban center, and a very attractive urban center, but the taxable parts of the university on the other side of the lake aren't going to benefit us. And I'm glad that Tim raised the question about the location of the hotel, because as pointed out in the report, the university draws a lot of people to its campus, but many of them stay out in hotels out on Route 1. And we do not benefit at all from those hotels, and they all have Princeton addresses as well.
you know, the one last thing I would say for people going forward on the Economic Development Committee, you know, it may be that you would want to take a position as a governing body on the number of liquor licenses that are available, that really in our town, the people that hold the liquor licenses are going to set their hair on fire when they hear this, but in other communities, there are other avenues for drinking. If you're trying to open a restaurant in town, rents are high, the barrier to entry, if you have to pay, I think the last liquor license traded for $1,077,550, and if you have to pay at least that for a liquor license, and then also the high rents, we're not likely to have more restaurants in town, which seem to be the thing that in towns where the liquor licenses aren't constricted, that's what's creating the lively sense of community.
I thought that was state law. You mean, so you think that there's something we could do about it?
Well, I think that they are considering from time to time other avenues. There are other, you know, there are categories of liquor licenses, and yes, it is controlled by the state, and that's why I said maybe at some point the municipality would want to consider taking a position on that or talking to people at the state level.
Yeah, agreed. It seems, I've never understood the logic behind that liquor license laws.
Okay, that's opening up a whole new topic here. But no, I mean, I think it's an interesting point. Are there any other comments for?
I just want to thank Bernie. He's
Yeah,
been
thank
on
you.
this from the beginning and did the yeoman's work on the report. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank the Economic Development Committee because I was looking and you guys interviewed or spoke to 33 different entities. That's incredible. I mean, thank you. That's a lot of time and a lot of...
Well, some people we talk to, not each individually, but like in groups. But still,
okay.
we'll take the thank you.
Well, thank you.
And also some of the meetings, particularly with the business owners and operators in town, got pretty heated at times.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Liz and Joe. The report was really teamwork from the three of us. I did the final pull together, but started with a draft that was developed by Mark, and then we iterated back and forth on it to get the final report.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
And I hope this is work that will be continued too. So it'll be something that comes up with council priority setting in January.
This is a living document, Liz.
Thank you. It won't get any dust on it. Be sure of that. Okay. Next, we come to the parking study, and tonight we're going to have a status update from Deanna Stockton, and on the agenda, it has the tentative date for a meeting with the parking consultants to come to council, and that's set for January 22nd, because we did want to make sure that it would be a better night for merchants to come. Hopefully they're very busy tonight selling, having good sales with holidays coming up. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Stockton.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Just to bring everybody up to speed, Nelson Nygaard, our parking consultant, has now completed 3 public meetings for the parking study.
I'm sorry, my ears must be really bad tonight, or else everyone's talking really softly, but if you could just like, Go right into your mic.
Okay, I'll speak right into the mic. So the consultant has finished 3 public meetings for the project in April, June, and November. All of the information so far has been posted to the municipal website. We are still accepting comments on the draft report and appendices that were posted after the November 20th meeting. Any comments can be sent to the engineering@princetonnj.gov email address, and we forward those on to the consultant. As you are aware, and actually it follows nicely with Mr. Miller's discussion about economic development, the parking study was focusing on economic vitality of our downtown area without losing quality of life for the adjacent residential areas. The consultant has come up with some conclusions at this point. They see that there is excess parking capacity downtown. However, it is not centrally located to where people want to park, and it's sometimes not under public access. So there is parking, but at times it is privately owned. And they also found that we have too many regulations regarding our parking, and that the zoning code, the good thing with our zoning code is that the parking requirements that we now have are fairly aggressive, and most of them exceed what the Institute for Transportation Engineers recommends for zoning, for parking related to zoning. So among the recommendations that they're bringing back to us is to look at adjusting those parking requirements that do exceed the ITE manual to bring those back in line with the ITE manual. Also for the zoning and the economic piece of it, they're putting forth a recommendation to consider regulations that allow developers to provide less off-street parking in exchange for perhaps payment in lieu of subsidies for transit, car sharing, or other bike share type programs that take away the reliance on the single occupancy vehicle. Just in terms of management of our parking, they are proposing that we should follow the theory of 85% occupancy of our parking so that we always have availability and turnover, and use that as the goal, and use strategies such as the expanded time limits for meters, as well as pricing to help us achieve those goals. They've also indicated, as we probably already know, that we need to improve our wayfinding and our parking maps to indicate where parking is available to visitors. And a big key component to a lot of the changes is updating our parking technology. By updating the meters and payment systems, we also provide expanded payment options, opportunities for businesses to work in validations. You can work out shared parking more on a market level rather than individual agreements with different property owners. It also helps with enforcement and formalizing our permit programs to be an electronic system. So the next steps will be that the consultant comes back in January to provide the final report to council for acceptance, and staff will also be looking to come back to council in January or February to present a schedule for bringing in that updated parking technology, changing out our parking meters, and also retiring the smart card. So that's the update. Any
Great.
questions?
Thanks, Dana. Yeah, Mr. Lieberman?
I'm sorry. Can I ask? I know Councilwoman Miller mentioned that if we do the smart cards, that if there's any money located that's left on a card, we can't refund the amount. Is there a way that we make a credit the person so that they can use the new meters? I'm just saying when you look into that, maybe find that's something that we could.
We'll evaluate that. I think at this point, what the goal is to give residents and smart card holders enough time to use up the amount on the smart cards.
Okay.
Currently, I think you can only load them with about $70 maximum at a time. So by giving advance notice, say in January or even now, it gives people time to use that balance up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned parking in private locations that the consultants mentioned. Now, private locations, do you mean like J Cycle Shop or IVN or those kind of places?
Correct.
They consider all that is
Right.
parking? Okay.
High Tops,
High Tops.
any business or entity that's downtown, those are potential opportunities for shared parking availability at off hours.
Because Lance, what the technology does is it allows those people, those business owners to put their parking on the same app that is used by the town so that we're not involved. But so they can provide parking and make money, and we can benefit from having more parking. So it seems like a really good opportunity.
That's beautiful. Can I do it on my driveway?
Sure.
Okay.
Ms. Butler?
Yes, thank you, Deanna. I was going to say, I attended the Princeton Future Saturday morning presentation about the parking, which was very well attended, by the way. I bet the room was full at a point, and some people wandered in and out. I want to make a couple of comments. I think it's a little funny that the consultant says that we've got too many rules and regulations. I mean, the fact is that what they're recommending is dynamic pricing for parking, and what we have really is kind of the old school dynamic pricing 101. I mean, we do have a lot of various regulations, but we're trying to be responsive to the parking in each one of those areas. I imagine that they go into every town in America that they do this for and make that same recommendation. I mean, as a consultant, I know that consultants have those recommendations in their quiver. But the one thing that I think is a little bit of a red flag is their recommendation that the parking revenue can then be used locally or by the people on the street. A lot of what the survey included areas that already have parking meters, not entirely. I mean, the tree streets were captured a little bit, but we're already charging for parking in most of it. So I can tell you that some of the residents got in their bit the idea that Maple Street's going to have a parking authority and Pine Street's going to have a parking, because they're going to get to use the revenue of whatever parking is generated or whatever decisions are made locally by parking. And I think one of the things we were trying to do was to look at that whole downtown area globally, not really individually. Like, we might create different pricing to encourage employees to park farther out and leave the in-close parking for shoppers. But clearly, it's been misinterpreted. And so I can tell you that a lot of people are coming thinking that they're going to have their own, that they've got a fiefdom. And I think it's a trend that we've seen not just with this parking, but with a lot of issues that have come up, that every neighborhood thinks that they're entirely different than, and a separate entity from the entire rest of the municipality. So I think you're going to have to pull the Band-Aid off on a lot of these changes at once, or it's just not going to work.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I understand that principle of the parking benefit districts, but I just don't see how it's going to work here. It doesn't seem to me like it's feasible. Well, because what do we,
I think the parking district here would have been the CBD,
right?
What we looked at, but
But
believe you me, that's not how those people
I
now want
agree.
to spend the money.
I just think we're too small of a town, and we don't have the resources to administer parking benefits districts. You're right.
Right. Although, I mean, I think it depends how you interpret it, and we could certainly say maybe there's things that come out of this economic development report that are going to require some funding, and, you know, maybe we take that out of some of the parking fees. I think already we use some of the parking money for the flower
Oh, yeah.
displays.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah, I'm all for
think-
that. I
think
just mean
we
not
already-
on an individual neighborhood street.
Right.
Which we already, you know, have aggressive tree planting, we have a sidewalk plan, so I don't know what other things we would.
Well, I agree, Liz. I think if we go back to the plan for the Nassau Street streetscape, that if we use that money to improve the streetscape, the sidewalks, there's so much to be done there, and more increased planting. But I just don't know if the people on these residential streets are going to view that as their part of their district.
Right.
But to the extent it could also use to be for technology, which we could then incorporate some of the existing parking from commercial lots. You know, if we could get the TD Bank, for example, to let us use that spot in the evening for the restaurants down there. You know, maybe the money could go for technology. It would get people off of the tree streets a little bit if we could get that shared parking down there. So maybe they'd buy into that.
Yeah, I think it's just a way of how we interpret what that recommendation is. And I think if we use it to just be more intentional about, instead of just putting all the money into a single fund, if we can say, be more transparent about the funds coming into the parking authority and then what we're spending from that authority, and to show that the parking money is going for things that are benefiting the town. And some might be things that we're already doing, but it just, I think tying the two together can just, I think, maybe take the sting out of some of the cost of the parking.
Right.
I took the suggestion that way, that it was just to try to marry those two things together a little bit more intentionally than we do now.
Right, I agree.
Yeah,
but-
I agree, but like in Donald Shoup's book and how they were selling it, it was like, okay, we're going to put more regulation, or we're going to increase the cost of the meters on your street, but don't worry, you'll get the money back. So
in investment, right.
I think we have to move away from that kind of language, because it really, I think people did interpret it that way, because I think it is in like Donald Shoup's book, it is like that.
We also have, as I said, a lot of that is metered. We already get that money into our parking authority, and we already take some of the money from the parking authority for our operating budget.
Well, I like to say for our roads, that it pays for the roads.
Well, okay, it's all fungible, but I'm telling you, it's already going into our there's not a whole bunch of new. And if we do the dynamic pricing so that no tickets are ever issued, because, you know, everybody just increases the money they've paid, we'll have a huge loss of parking revenue.
Right.
So we don't know how it's going to net out. We may be poorer from this when it's all said and done.
Mr. Miller, did you have a comment? All right, anybody else? Okay, thanks, Deanna. Okay, and now I'm not going to forget that we still have council reports. So this time I'll start on my right. Mr. Liverman, any reports? Mr. Miller, any reports? No, I give mine. Yes. Yeah, you already did your duty with reports.
I just wanted to report about the planning board meeting on Thursday night, that the Historic Preservation had denied the request for the Tusculum fence, and they and the planning board overturned the Historic Preservation decision and allowed the new fence that nobody, I mean, that is, it doesn't seem as popular. Yes. Oh, she
If I could just say, strictly speaking, it was, Alan would remind us that we heard it as a new application and not as, even though
That's true, very true.
our decision was different than the one that HPC came to, popularly known as Fencegate, the meeting.
Okay. Ms. Butler?
I was just going to make one quick announcement. The youth squash program has one space left, and the program begins in early January at Jadwin, so anybody who's interested.
And Mr. Quinn?
No reports.
Okay, I have a couple reports. The first is, I don't know if this is a report that Mr. Grosser was going to have too, but we're moving ahead still with the Seamless new website, and the group's meeting towards the end of next week to finalize the design. So it's very exciting, and it's still mostly on track to have a new website by the beginning of 2018. Our first quarter 2018. Give me a. But I'm really excited. I think it's, I think there's some tweaks that still need to be made, but I think people are going to be really happy with the new look and the ease of navigating the site. I also wanted to report that early last week I was out in Chicago for the North American Climate Summit and was able to sign on to the agreement that Council had approved at our last meeting. And there are about 50 towns and cities represented there from mostly from the U.S., but also Canada, Mexico. And Mayor Paris was there too. And we heard from President Obama, who came, who talked about just how he felt addressing climate change was the most important part of his agenda as president, because he said if we don't figure out a way to deal with climate change, nothing else is going to matter. And that he spoke really eloquently, as he always does, just about sort of coming to terms with his own mortality as he's seeing his kids get older, and just the importance of being able to leave the world, a world that's still functioning, to his kids and his grandkids. And he also said the whole intention of the Paris Agreement was that it would be implemented on the ground. And so having cities pledge to this was, it wasn't like we were veering off what the original intention was, that this was really important. One of the things I thought was interesting is that there was news the previous week from Moody's that that they announced that cities and towns that didn't have a plan in place to prepare for climate change were going to be potentially subject to a credit downgrade. So I think it's really important that we're doing the work that we're doing, and this climate action plan that we're about to embark on is important for multiple reasons. And I say I was like really just proud to be there representing Princeton. We weren't the smallest town there. There were towns that were smaller than us. And that we're right in there doing a lot of the important work that other cities and towns are doing around the country. I was asked to represent Princeton on one of the panels, so it was myself and the mayor of Austin, who's a Princeton grad, and talking about transportation, and there's a lot of interest in the Zagster program here, in our parking study, in the freebie. So, and it was interesting to hear from other towns too, and people struggling with similar issues that we're struggling with, in particular this last mile problem of how you get people to the transit corridor and then from the transit corridor to wherever they're trying to go, to their job or their work. And how we think about that and plan for that when the technology is changing so quickly. But there was a lot of optimism too, and a lot of towns are making use. I just noticed when I was out there and I used the lift, that the lift now has carpool built into it, and I think Uber does too. So there's I think the technology is potentially going to help us in a positive way get to where we want to go. I also want to report that I attended with Deanna a meeting with New Jersey Department of Transportation, university representatives were there, West Windsor, Plainsboro, DVRPC to talk about the Route 1 project, which is now back on track. I think our resolution that we sent, along with some of the other towns' resolutions that they sent, has the DOT taking another look to really try to make this, to the extent Route 1 could be a complete street project, at least make it so that there's safe facilities there for bicyclists and for pedestrians. And this is an area where it's really great to have the university at the table because they own so much of the frontage there, and because of the campus plan that I think DOT is very interested in figuring out a way to tie in a bike pedestrian crossing, probably which will be at Fisher Place, into the university system on our side, and then it will continue on the other side, and it'll be just a saner way to cross Route 1 on that side of Washington, because when you think about if the road is going to be widened, what's an unsafe sort of hairy crossing right now is going to be even more treacherous. So it's important to have a light and a protected crossing. So anyway, that's continuing, and I'll continue to report on it, especially with the new administration. Are there any staff reports? No? Any staff reports on that end? No? Okay.
I have a question. Can we get an update on the Mary Moss Park RFP?
We are working in the engineering department to finalize the specifications and provide last-minute comments back to the consultant for plan changes. We've been marrying the consultant documents with our standard documents for bidding, and finding that additional work needed to be done to make it a very sound package for contractors to bid upon. So we're in those last stages now and anticipate putting it out to bid. Ben and I will have to talk about it with the upcoming holidays, but it may be right after the first of the year that we'll put it out to bid. Still looking, we were hopeful that contractors would be able to start work after the first of the year, but realistically with winter weather, that is a challenging time, and often contractors will just hold until the weather improves. So we're still in good shape. The contract is set up so that the park will be open and operational by June 15th, I think is the date we've set.
Well, how long does the bid document need? How long does the RFP have to be out?
It's a minimum of 10 days, but we are looking at about a 3-week time frame. It gives time to provide for a non-mandatory pre-bid meeting and the legal window of time to release any addendums on the contract. If questions come up during the pre-bid meeting, it allows us time to respond back to all of the bid holders. So we would look, with that time frame, look to award in February.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other reports? No? Okay. So we'll move on then to the public hearing for tonight, which is on the Pardo Road curbing assessment. And I don't think there's anybody here from Pardo Road, but I will, there's a resolution here, but I open up the public hearing and then close the public hearing and then we vote on the resolution. Is that okay? So I'm going to open up the public hearing. If anybody would like to speak to the Pardo Row curbing? All right, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and see
I'll
if
move
there's, the resolution has
Second.
been moved and moved by Ms. Krummeler, seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution passes unanimously. That was 17-383. Next, we come to a set of resolutions. We'll start with the first one, 17384, resolution awarding the contract known as Television Inspection of Sanitary Sewer Laterals for the Princeton Sewer Operating Committee, November 2017 through December 2018, to Integrated Construction and Utilities of New Jersey, LLC, in the amount of $38,975.
I'll move it.
It's moved by Ms. Krummeller,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 17385, resolution awarding the contract known as Placement and Removal of Solid Waste Dumpsters for 2018 to Mercer Group International of New Jersey Incorporated in the amount of $79,000. It's moved by Ms. Krummeller. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passed unanimously. Next is 17386, resolution awarding the contract known as Electrical Services, various locations within the municipality of Princeton for 2018 to Tom L. Wells, electrical contractor, with a bid amount of $40,000 and a contract amount not to exceed $150,000. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Let's just get it moved and seconded, and then we'll open up to questions. So it's been moved by Ms. Krummeller. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Quinn. And then Mr. Miller, you had a question?
Yes, I do. It says a bid amount of $40,000 and a contract amount not to exceed $150,000. Does that mean that any funds above $150,000 will come back to council? Above $40,000 will come back to council for approval?
No, will not.
So we're placing a contract for $150,000 for electrical services, and Wells is an electrician.
Correct.
I mean,
If you recall-
we could go out and put an electrician on our staff for less than $150,000 a year, I think. What are we buying?
And again, it's a number of things. It's one, it's all of the electrical work that we do for a year. And if you've noticed, even I believe at our last meeting, we actually had to increase the contract from last year. In addition to providing electrical services throughout the year in terms of the work that he does, he also provides some equipment, comes through that contract also.
And Bernie, when I asked about this, I was told that things like this go in cycles. Some years it's like some years we don't spend very much on plumbing, and then another year we spend a lot, and it's the same with electrical work, and we can't always predict.
Well, I understand that, but I look below at the next resolution, it's $75,000 for plumbing, and I can understand how with the facilities that we have, we might spend $75,000 on plumbing services in a year, having spent a lot less than that in my own house. But I understand how it can build up to $75,000, but $150,000, that's a lot of electrician, and Mark has said it is also hardware in addition to services of an electrician. It's not a small amount of money.
You're right. It's a lot. It's high.
You know,
But
What we can do for you just to give
as
council.
a famous congressman said, 150,000 here, 150,000 there, and sooner or later it adds up to real money.
We do have a lot of facilities. What I can do for council, just to give you an idea, is just to give you an idea of what we spent and where we spent it in the previous years, so that you can see what, where we're spending this type of money.
Well, it's in
Just to give
the
you an example.
resolution. It's outlined in the resolution, all of the projects that the money is for. So
Yeah.
I think it's, about
I was just gonna
8
say
or
that.
9 different
Yeah,
projects.
I was just going to say that. It's a whole bunch of stuff.
I guess I'd be more comfortable if I could see it broken down into labor and material.
I don't think we'll have that level of detail. Some of it we do, and some of it is for projects as they come up.
Then I think what was asked for a moment ago by somebody in my left on council was some history to justify the number.
Okay, well, I'd also just direct you to the resolution in itself where it talks about the different capital accounts and the different projects. So there's the pumping stations, there's the Witherspoon Building emergency power improvements, there's the Monument Hall repairs, Witherspoon Building repairs, sanitary sewer system repairs, another one at the pumping stations, parking general yearly repairs. And for each of these, I think it's a round number, so I think that's where the $150,000 comes to, is that it's already specified in these capital ordinances. But I think that the expectation and hope would be that you're not going to necessarily max out. But
it is, again, it's the maximum number, depending on, and it depends on years, like the Councilwoman said. Some years it's high, we going up to 150,000. Some years we don't, depending on what work actually gets done that year.
Okay, well, the resolution's been moved and seconded, so I recommend that we take a vote, and then if there's people who want to hold it too, they can indicate that when we vote. So why don't we start with a voice vote just to see if that's clear. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, so it's 5 in favor, and Mr. Miller is voting no. Oh, 4 in favor, thank you. 4 in favor, and Mr. Miller opposed. All right, next we come to Resolution 17-387, resolution awarding the contract known as Plumbing Services, various locations within the municipality of Princeton for 2018 to Magic Touch Construction Company Incorporated with a bid amount of $36,684 with a contract amount not to exceed $75,000. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That resolution passes unanimously. Next is 17-388, resolution further amending the professional services agreements for affordable housing litigation for special counsel services provided by Jeffrey R. Surian and Associates and the Buzak Law Group to Princeton in 2017 in the amount of $15,000. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Question.
It's
Yeah.
been moved by Mr.
Question.
Quinn and seconded by Ms. Krummeller, and there's a question for Mr. Miller.
Yeah, is this playing catch-up with money that's already been spent, or?
Well, it's the money hasn't been spent, but we've got pending bills
It's
that need to
pending
be
bills.
paid. We've been
Okay.
holding them because I wanted to come to you one time, not multiple times, so we waited until we knew.
But
There's about 12.
Basically, we're finished with these two gentlemen.
No, there may be more next year once the decision is issued. Right now, this is to cover the unpaid bills are just under $12,000, and then anticipating that Judge Jacobson will probably release her opinion before the end of the year, there will be some additional expenses because they're going to have to review it. So that's the $3,000 cushion. And then next year, you'll decide if you want to retain them again.
Ms. Butler, do you have a question or comment?
Okay, so we're increasing this by $15,000, but 12 we already owe 12.
Correct.
So to Councilman Miller's point, it has been spent. I mean, we already owe it.
We owe it.
Yeah.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So this resolution passes unanimously, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Trishka, but you feel that there's going to be a decision before the end of the year, but
She's on the spot.
The rumors are that there will be a decision before the end of the year.
okay.
The educated rumors.
Okay.
When before the end of the year?
That December 27th meeting is going to be a heck of a meeting.
Crucial.
I'm
You guys will
hoping
be
for a
sorry
lot
you're
of
not
people's
there.
sakes that it's not, right at Christmas time, because that's just going to ruin the holidays for every affordable housing lawyer in the state. So,
All right.
Or make their year, depending on how you look at it.
Okay. All right. So now we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by a single vote. Are there any items anybody would like removed from the consent agenda? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay. So it's been moved by Ms. Butler and seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. And is there a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor?
Aye.